The 464th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! Got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony coming at you here on a Saturday night about 2.5, 3 hours so after Carolina picked up the biggest win of the 2024-2025 season with a thrilling, dramatic, come-from-behind victory over the UCLA Bruins in the CBS Sports Classic in Madison Square Garden earlier today. And we're here to talk all about it because this is a win that Carolina desperately needed. They were able to earn it, and a lot of interesting things come out of the win. A lot of positives. There are some negative things we have to talk about as well. But with all the things this team has been through the first 2 months of the year, to finally be able to close out a big-time opponent, win a big game like they won today, we're certainly going to celebrate that and sit here and enjoy it on a Saturday night. As I mentioned, Carolina picked up the win, 76-74. They erased a 16-point deficit. They were down 59-43 in the second half. Over the final 12 minutes and 50 seconds, though, they would outscore UCLA 33-15, including allowing just one field goal over the final 8 minutes and 57 seconds, 0 field goals inside the last 3 minutes and 42 seconds. And it all adds up to another win for Carolina against UCLA. They're now 12-3 all time against the Bruins. They've won 6 in a row, 11 of 12, and they improved to 7-4 in the CBS Sports Classic. We talked about going into this game how much Carolina needed to win. There aren't many times you hear the words must win in college basketball in December, but tonight, for all intents and purposes, was a must win for Carolina. With the way that the ACC is shaping up, there's not going to be many chances to earn, marquee victories, what we call quad one wins in college basketball. Those opportunities won't exist in conference play. You had to get this one. And to be honest with you, when they got down 16, that didn't look possible. It looked like, from my vantage point, I thought this team had quit and they had just realized this mountain is too hard to climb. We don't have what it takes to beat these types of teams, and we're going to roll over and play dead. But what this team has done in every game this year that they have lost, they have fought. And they put together another comeback. They put themselves in position to win the game late. And was it the cleanest execution? No, it was not. But it was better execution than we saw in losses to Kansas, Michigan State, or more recently against Florida on Tuesday night in Charlotte. And it all adds up to a win that no matter what happens the rest of the year, if Carolina were to make the tournament, make some sort of noise this basketball season, we will point back at this win, this comeback as the turning point for this year's team.
Yeah, I mean, this is what you're really hoping becomes the game that they sort of rally around. And now going into conference play where things will be a little bit easier, you hope that this is a confidence boost for these guys, because it felt like in these games where you had a chance against tournament quality opponents, they just couldn't find ways to win, whether it was they didn't battle their way back into the game like Alabama, or if it was, games like Michigan State, Kansas, Florida the other night, where Carolina would battle their way back into the game, but then down the stretch, they simply weren't able to execute the way that they needed to in order to come out with a victory. This was a great win for Carolina. This is a UCLA team that I think, as we saw today, especially if Bryce Bilodeau is going to continue to play the way that he did against Carolina, they are going to be a very successful team in the Big Ten. They are going to challenge to win that conference this season. So I think this one was incredibly important. Again, it was not easy. There were, down the stretch of this game, some moments that Carolina would definitely want to have back that would have made the game a little bit easier. Again, another clutch missed free throw by RJ Davis. But then when he needs to make free throws late in the game, he comes through with two that eventually give Carolina the lead. So, it was just a gritty effort against a team that was really good defensively, and Carolina found a way to solve them late in the game, made the stops that they had to on the other end of the floor, and they come out with a massive, massive victory that gives them a quad one win to go alongside of that win that they had earlier in the season back in Maui against Dayton.
Yeah, you mentioned RJ missing the free throw late. It's not easy watching players that you love make mistakes that could cost you ball games. And, no one hates it more than RJ himself. But, he missed a big free throw against Florida, missed a big one tonight. But the reason why I think we love him as a player is he got a chance to pick himself up. And he went up to the line, all the confidence in the world he'd make both, knocked them both down, and helped Carolina get a win. I thought their resiliency in the final 4 minutes today was as high, as good as it's been all year long, because they made plays or made mistakes that could have lost them the game. But they just – today felt like a refusal to lose. It was, or, like I said, when I said they might have rolled over and played dead, they were a refusal to die, because they can sit here and they can talk about blocking out the noise and not listening to what's being said about them, tweeted about them, whatever. They know the reality of the situation. And I don't know if Hubert Davis communicated to him. If he did, he probably would not be honest with us and tell us that. But that should have been the conversation. That should have been the motivating factor going into the game. And then once you got down 16, which was, if this is what you want to be remembered by, then keep playing the way you're playing. Because what's been so frustrating throughout this year is it's not from a lack of capability. Carolina is capable of winning these games. You don't have the leads that they've had late at Kansas, against Michigan State and Maui, against Florida the other night again in the Jumpman, if you weren't a capable team. If you are not a capable team, you would have happened to you what happened in the Auburn game, which was you pretty much got control, dominated from the opening tip on. But that hasn't been the case. But we've been frustrated by how experienced this group is in the backcourt, not being able to make winning plays, their inability to grab rebounds, whatever it is. And today, even though it wasn't the cleanest execution, they found a way as a unit, and they found a way to make those winning plays. And for a locker room that's been beaten up for the last month or so, the confidence that they're going to feel going into the holiday break is as high as it's been all year long, because they can finally look themselves in the mirror, watch the game film that will be evaluated, and say that we can do it, that we can win. And a lot of times, man, belief is a big thing in sports. Like, you got to have talent, you got to execute, but you got to believe you can do the thing too. And I think this group, after the loss the other night, that belief was probably as low as it's ever been, because once again you were there, once again you were in position, and once again you came up short. That's not the case now. Now you can point to 2 games that, yes, you had to erase a double-digit deficit again, but there's now belief there that if the game is close with 4 minutes to go, we can win. We're capable of winning. And hopefully this is the jumping off point, the springboard to a season that, there's no denying that I think we've changed our expectations for this group. But this season was trending towards a lost season. Let's forget about that type of season. Let's hope this now is the springboard to a season that we as Carolina basketball fans can point at and say, they may not have achieved X, Y, and Z, still a fun group, still a group that was worth investing 40 nights out of the year and giving up, 2 hours, 2 nights a week to watch them play. Let's hope that's what tonight kind of represents for Carolina. Let's take a look at the box score. Uneven in a lot of ways, but there were some other things that really lead you to believe that Carolina won the game. They shot 47% from the field for the game. They were 22 of 47. UCLA was 26 of 53. They shot 49%, but as I mentioned, only 1 field goal over the last 9 minutes. So Carolina really got the work done on the defensive end. Carolina was 8 of 23 from deep. That was 35%. UCLA was very effective from the perimeter. They were 9 of 18 from behind the three-point line. We mentioned going into the game, it would be real important for Carolina to get to the foul line, score with that clock stop. They did that today. 24 of 35 from the foul line. You would love that percentage to be higher than 69%, although it is a nice percentage, but they were plus 11 at the foul line. UCLA just 13 of 22 from the charity stripe. Turnovers. Both teams sloppy with the ball. Carolina, 18 turnovers, led to 24 points for the Bruins. On the flip side, UCLA with 15 turnovers, that led to 13 points for Carolina. The Heels won the rebounding margin 34-28. They won the defensive glass 25-21. They won the offensive glass 9-7. And another big key for Carolina in this game, second chance points 13-2 in favor of the guys in Carolina blue. Both teams scored 24 points in the paint. The Heels with 16 fast break points. UCLA had 17. Ultimately, Carolina with 11 assists on 22 made baskets. UCLA with 17 assists on their 26 made baskets. The game was tied 5 times. There were 2 lead changes, and Carolina led ultimately for just 50 seconds. Kind of what you see like in a NASCAR race where, about 2/3 of, Denny Hamlin's wins have come with him leading, the last 2 laps of the race. But it felt like a race in that, NASCAR where you see a driver kind of just come out of nowhere and win. And that's really what Carolina did today. They were behind 16. There was, I think, little energy in the building, little belief on that bench that they could get it done. And then we've seen him emerge, and we've seen it in flurries. Ian Jackson was the best player on the floor for Carolina in the second half. And he led Carolina today with 24 points, 8 of 13 from the field, 3 of 7 from 3. It's 24 points, the most by a Carolina freshman since a guy named Caleb Love scored 25 in a win over Duke. But you look back at the comeback, and I'd love to say it was R.J. Davis, love to say it was Seth Trimble. It was Ian Jackson pretty much doing what he did the other night, getting in one-on-one situations and just cooking his defender, whether it was being able to get to the rim, or hitting step back jumpers that will have him in the NBA this time a year ago. He hit a lot of threes in the first half to keep Carolina close. We talked about going into the season, he might have been Carolina's best talent on the roster. We've really seen that talent show up the last two games, and luckily and hopefully for him, it delivered today in a big win for the Heels.
Yeah, I mean, it was exactly what they needed from him because, you look at this performance from RJ Davis and, the first half I thought shot the ball pretty well overall. I mean, he was just 2 of 5, but it felt like you could definitely see there was more confidence. The second half, 3 of 7, he scores 10 points, but Ian Jackson was really the guy that carried Carolina during those moments where it looked like Carolina was out of it. He was the guy that was still out there making plays for Carolina. And here's the thing, he played 32 minutes. I know there's this push, we need to start Ian Jackson. Here's the thing about it. I don't care if they start him or not. He just needs to be in there a majority of the time, whether it is as that fourth guard or if he is in there in place of Elliot Cadeau. I think that's what you need from him. And he showed you today why you need to play him because, again, this is not the most creative team offensively. They're not a great screening team. They don't have the ability to put the ball inside. I mean, they've finally, for the first time, it feels like all year, at one point in the game, did put it inside on the low block to Vin Allen Lubin, who had position, draws a foul, and they never really went back to that. I don't understand why. But I mean, without those things being a part of what you do offensively, you need guys that can play isolation basketball and can create on their own. And Ian Jackson has consistently shown you that he can do that. I mean, we were talking, as we were driving back, you got a message from one of the guys that frequents our podcast, also a big listener to WFNZ. And he was asking you, who is is Ian Jackson the best freshman since? Who would you say was that last great freshman for Carolina? And it's probably Kobe White. And this type of performance is some of what we saw from Kobe White, a guy that can simply just create on his own and makes it almost impossible for the defense to be able to stop him. And there was a point in this game where Ian Jackson was impossible to stop. I think that he is a huge key to Carolina succeeding down the stretch of this season. If him and RJ Davis can play at the level that they've played the last 2 games, then Carolina has a chance to put together a very strong conference season and get themselves back in the conversation to make a run deep in March. I think he is certainly capable of it. I think this is a guy that, again, even if you leave him coming off the bench, he is going to find a way to make a massive impact, and it's going to be nearly impossible to take him off the floor. So Carolina needed him desperately today, and this was one of the guys that we were wondering, in front of basically a home crowd, as a guy that played in New York City, would he show out or would he be a little bit nervous? He was certainly far from nervous in this one and looked the part of a lot of the other guys that we see play in that building throughout for 41 games a season.
Let's now move to the quote of the game, where you're going to hear about a minute or so answer from Hubert Davis, talking about how proud he is of Ian Jackson. He kind of works in from compliments for RJ Davis as well. So here's Hubert Davis talking to the media after the win about his proudness of 2 players that helped Carolina earn a marquee win this afternoon.
Just our schedule in general from the start has been we've had a lot of.
What do you mean?
We've been battle tested all year. This first 12 games feels like we've been in March Madness games, but that's what it's going to be like at the end of the year, where we're playing against tough teams all the way to the wire, and being able to execute, being able to get an extra rebound, an extra stop, and I think that's where we're starting to get the hang of a little bit. I think Coach Davis does a good job of kind of just emphasizing to us, like he said yesterday, shooting around our practice, that you're not gonna have a chance of one more because we scored on blue and they wanted another possession to get a stop. But life is not always gonna move that way. You're not always gonna have another chance to get another stop, get another win. So when you live in that moment and live and be present, you gotta give your all. And I feel like having these battle tested games early on helps us build. And obviously we made some mistakes and we lost some games that we should have won. But I think overall it's helping us build to the team I know we can be. So yeah.
All right, obviously that was not Huber Davis talking about Ian Jackson and R.J. Davis. That was R.J. Davis talking about the struggles they've gone through building up to today's win.
Also, apparently he was doing that press conference from the rafters of Madison Square Garden, apparently. That was a little tough to hear there at times. But, I mean, that's I guess, sort of what you run into, especially when you're getting – the stuff from some of the people that are in that interview room and everything like that.
So, yeah, my apologies. Pulled the wrong clip. It's whatever. Still great audio from RJ because I think the message rings true. And I think the difficult thing to really talk about with Carolina the first 2 months is I don't think we've ever seen a team play this level of competition the first month and a half of the year. I know I certainly haven't. And seen them lose all the games. And I know I went out on a limb and picked Carolina to go undefeated in the non-conference season. I was wrong.
A bit outside.
Did not see the limitations in the front court being as severe as they are, but we're used to seeing Carolina play big games. We're used to seeing Carolina lose some big games in November and December. We're not used to them losing all of them. And that's been the case up until today. Yes, the Dayton win is a big win. Dayton's a quality program. They're probably going to win the A-10. They'll be a respectable seed in the tournament and could win a game or two. Carolina basketball should beat Dayton every time they walk on the floor with an A-10 program. But we've seen Carolina play blue blood programs like Kansas, like Michigan State, and we've seen them get beat. We've seen them play upstarts out of the SEC that have Final Four caliber talent in Alabama, in Florida, and we've seen them get beat. Then you get this UCLA game today where blue blood program, the best defensive team Carolina has played all year and maybe will play all year, and they're down 16. And so we're sitting here just thinking, oh, my God, have we regressed this much as a program that we can't beat anybody? Because that's what it was starting to look like. And then everything changed in the final 13 minutes. And I think, what RJ said, you're hoping rings true, is that all the struggles, all the shortcomings are building them into being the best team that they can be. And that when they get into an ACC that is as watered down as it's ever been, it's as arguably the weakest the conference has been in the history of my lifetime. Hopefully this team is prepared to rip off a significant number of wins. I mean, they went 17-3 last year and won the league. And the league was much better a year ago. The league was deeper than it was a year ago. I can't sit here and say that I'm confident they could do such a thing again this year, but I think that's got to be the hope because they're really going to need to have a special ACC season to really put themselves to be a threat come March if they were to make the NCAA tournament. But, we always talk about how sports are a great metaphor for life and about how you got to keep getting up after you get knocked down. Man, this team's been knocked down a lot the first month and a half of the year. And I think the one thing that we can say that we're proud of is that they never give in. They haven't caved. They got back up today, and luckily they were the last ones standing to throw the final punch.
Yeah. I mean, it's honestly, we were guys that used to cover boxing. It's like a guy that gets knocked down multiple times during the fight, and you think, okay, well, this is certainly not going their way. At some point, they're going to quit. They come back and find a way to knock down the opponent. And that's what you saw today. And the thing that really stood out to me was when you watched them in the handshake line, you could see a lot of smiles and really just relief. Guys looking like, thank God we finally were able to get over this hump. Because I think in their minds, you look at the games against that I talked about against Kansas, Michigan State, and Florida the other night, games that they probably, should have been out of at certain points, especially Kansas and Florida. I think those are two teams that, in their minds probably felt like they should have put Carolina away, and they had the talent to do it. And Carolina just found a way back into the game. For them, the frustration had to be building with, we've found a way to battle back into these games. We've had leads late in two of these games. All three, if at a certain point, they were up in that game against Michigan State as well. And we just haven't been able to execute down the stretch. And this game was different. And for them to finally get that win, and you could tell, again, they knew how important this game was. I'm assuming that message was communicated to them that, guys, we play in a conference that stinks right now. This is a conference that most people around college basketball believe will put maybe 4 teams into the tournament. More than likely, most people look at this conference right now as a 3-bid conference because there are not that many good teams in this conference. A team like Clemson, who might be good, you only play them once. Now, Pittsburgh is another team that a lot of people believe will make the tournament. You do play them twice. And, of course, Duke, you play twice. But that's really it. Those are the 5 games that you look at in conference play and you think, okay, they have any shot of being a quad 1 game. Maybe there is another team that ends up emerging as the season goes along. Pittsburgh was kind of like that last year where we didn't really expect them to be any good. And then once they got into conference play, you realized, okay, this is a pretty solid team. But for Carolina, I think they knew how important this game was. And so for them to execute down the stretch like that and finally get that win that now at least makes them feel somewhat safe going into conference play. Like here's the thing. Now, if you split with Duke, I don't think anybody is going to say this team's not making the tournament as long as you take care of everybody else that you should. If they had lost this game, we were staring down a scenario where, depending on what the rest of conference play looked like, you probably would have to beat Duke both times to end up making the NCAA tournament. And so that's what makes this win so big. I love it for Hubert Davis as well, because the other night, he was heavily criticized. People were going after him. Well, he doesn't seem to have any answers. Well, he told you everything that you needed to know. This was a team that practiced incredibly well, had their 2 best practices of the year right before playing in that event, and it simply didn't translate. So for him to finally be able to see it translate onto the court into a victory, I think that's huge for his psyche as a head coach, because, I think part of it too is this guy's got to be exhausted. He's probably, struggling to sleep after these losses like Roy Williams did, because he's searching for answers that really none of us have had. And so I think being rewarded in this one is going to be huge for the mindset of the team and the mindset of your head coach, which is what you need. You need a clear-headed head coach going into conference play.
Stat of the game, I went free throws. Carolina 24 of 35 from the foul line. UCLA was 13 of 22. They were plus 11 in that category. They benefited greatly from a severely tight whistle in the second half that had both teams in the bonus and in the double bonus. And look, Carolina left some points at the foul line. RJ missed a big one late. Elliot Cadeau missed some. Ian Jackson missed some, but
everybody who attempted a free throw today missed at least one. So
with the clock stopped to get 24 points scored against that defense was huge. Because you had to grind out possessions, you had to earn everything that you got. So you had to reward yourself for getting them in foul trouble and converting. Would love to shoot a better percentage than what you did, but nonetheless, that played a big role in today's victory. Let's now get into more thoughts, more takeaways from tonight's win. We appreciate everybody that are joining us live here, whether you're on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube. And of course, those of you that will listen to the podcast as well, we appreciate your support. You got to talk about the hometown kids. Carolina back in the Garden, third straight year they've played at MSG under Hubert Davis. He told you when he got the job, he was taking the program back to New York. They played a lot there under Coach Smith. They played a lot there just in general. They've played now 71 games in New York City. So it's part of what made this program so national back in the 60s and the 70s. But this is a home game for R.J. Davis, for Ian Jackson, Elliot Cadeau. But Jackson and Davis combined to score 41 points tonight of the 76. I think you saw two things today. You saw the emergence of Ian Jackson as maybe being this team's best player. There's no doubt there's no denying he's got the most individual raw talent, raw ability of anybody on this roster. Mm-hmm. And, this isn't a name I want to talk about, but he brought up a good point. With him on the court, with RJ on the court, with Seth Trimble on the court, and Elliot Cadeau on the court, I think those four guys are starting to learn how to play with one another. And Jay Wright said after the game, Hubert Davis knows how to play with four guards in terms of how to coach that. He knows how to coach that style of basketball. But these guys got to learn how to play with one another. Mm-hmm. And you saw it in a big part in the second half their night against Florida, and you saw it tonight where we don't know who Carolina's best five-man is. Today it was Ty Claude. But we know what Carolina's best four is. And it's Davis, Cadeau, Trimble, and Ian Jackson. And I don't know about you. Maybe this is too far of a stretch. The way that RJ and the way that Captain Jack were playing off one another in the second half, it felt like and looked very similar to what we saw from RJ and Caleb in the run to the national title game in 2022, where it's not always pretty, but you've got one guy that could isolate himself and make shots. That's Ian Jackson. And then you've got RJ who, with what Ian puts pressure on the defense, can get to the hole cleaner, is drawing fouls, is doing all the other things that make RJ the winning player. So I think there's a lot to really unpack about them two guys moving forward, how you play with them, who you put on the court with them. But those two guys in front of their family and friends fueled the comeback today. And, I think Carolina fans should feel confident moving forward that as long as those two guys are on the court playing at a high level simultaneously, this team has a chance to play with anybody in the country.
Yeah, it makes sense that they're the two guys that led you in minutes in this game because they were the two best players. They're two guys that at this point are getting almost impossible to take off the floor because, you look at what they're doing on both ends of the floor. And, look, we're not going to look at these guys as the best defenders in the conference. They're not even the best defenders on their own team. But the effort is always there. And then on the offensive end, they're the guys that are scoring the ball. We saw it again in that, going back to Tuesday night. They did the same thing in the game against Florida. They were the reason that you got back into the game because one thing that has been common in these last two games, Seth Trimble has struggled a little bit, man. We thought he was going to be that second scorer for Carolina alongside RJ Davis. And I still think he is a more than capable scorer. I think he just has had two tough games after being very, very consistent for Carolina in the first 10 games of the season. I think he'll gain it back at some point. But hey, if he's going to be that third scorer for you because Ian Jackson steps up and is playing that well, then you'll take it. And, you look, both of the guys that we're looking at right now in this game that we think are guys you can't take off the floor. With the way that Carolina is built this year, you are a team that uses a lot of isolation basketball on the offensive end of the floor. Those are the two guys that can consistently create separation and knock down shots. And so, Jackson, I think it's been sort of a steady progression for him. I really think with RJ Davis, it started to click in the game against Florida. And I know he missed an important free throw, the front end of that 1-and-1. That could have affected him. I thought today you saw, RJ sort of build off of what he did the other day against Florida. And I think now you've sort of started to unlock it. 17 points, on a day where you get 24 from Ian Jackson is perfectly fine. I think if he would have had to take more shots, if he would have had to score more points, RJ would have been capable of doing that. So I think you're happy that now RJ seems to be settling into a rhythm. And while he's been struggling, you found that second scoring option, potentially even a guy that might be the first scoring option at certain times. And someone that, now you look at and say, is a legitimate all-conference type player to go alongside of him. I think you are feeling very confident about where this team is at offensively heading into conference play. Now it's just about making sure that you're where you want to be at defensively, especially in some of these first halves.
Well, that's where we'll go next. Carolina's defense came up clutch in this win tonight. We'll just reiterate some of the defensive numbers in the victory. They allowed just one field goal over the last 8 minutes and 57 seconds, and I think one field goal in the last 3 minutes and 42. They outscored UCLA 33-15 over the last 12:50 of the ball game, and that was after UCLA shot well above 50% in the first half. So more of what we've seen where Carolina defensively in the first half, not connected, not putting pressure on the ball, very much allowing the opponent to do and dictate whatever they want. I mean, you look at Bilodeau, he came out, scored 11 of the first 11 points of the game for the Bruins, was getting the ball uncontested, clean looks. Vanal and Lubin just could not guard him. One adjustment I think you got to praise Schubert Davis for. Ty Claude battled with him more and was able to really get him off his block, get him out of where he wanted to get the ball, made him have to work and earn everything. But the thing that turned this game again was the press. And it effectively won Carolina the game because you're down one with 22 seconds left to go. Obviously, you're going to pick up full court to try to force a turnover, if not foul, and extend the game. What's Carolina do? They force the ball to be inbounded into the corner. They collide. They trap. The ball goes off a Bruins foot. Carolina gets the ball on the ensuing possession. RJ gets fouled, knocks down 2 free throws. Carolina takes the lead, holds on to win the game. You're going to play 4 guards. You're going to have to do things creatively defensively. You're going to have to do some other things because you're not going to have the size. You're not going to have the strength to hold up. Hubert Davis keeps saying publicly that he believes in it, wants to commit to it more. We still see it as a defensive ploy. We see it deployed when Carolina gets down double digits and they have to get back into the ball game. When I tell you that every single time they pressed today, it resulted in something positive, I am not lying. It resulted in a turnover, a missed shot, or a missed shot with a over-the-back foul. And some of it was when Carolina was already in the bonus for the double bonus. So Carolina was going down to the other end of the court and knocking down free throws with the clock stopped. Nonetheless, I think you have to be impressed, given the limitations of this roster with their size and their height, no rim protector, with the fact that their best lineup is now playing with 4 guards and in one form or fashion, an undersized 5-man, whether it's Lubin or Allen or a non-ACC level big, in my opinion, right now, Jalen Washington. And they played as well as they did defensively. Like, we can sit here and sing the praises of Ian Jackson, talk about RJ Davis bouncing back and making winning plays in the final 4 minutes. None of this happens unless Carolina dug in on the defensive end of the floor. And that's exactly what they did. They're not going to scare anyone defensively. No one's going to be afraid of them. This is the 45th ranked defense in the country according to KenPom. But again, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, there's now a higher level of belief because they did all these things and got rewarded for it. And so just really proud of the defensive effort because did not see that coming with the way that UCLA started the game and the way they raced out to that 16-point lead in the second half. I thought they were going to overwhelm them, continue to get easy buckets, but as this group has done often this year, they got in a stance. They upped their level of intensity. They made UCLA have to work for it, and it ultimately was what fueled the comeback.
Yeah, I mean, look, 0 field goals in that last 3 minutes, 42 seconds. So, part of it was that, at one point, Jalen Washington was literally just putting Tyler Bilodeau on the free throw line, and he simply wasn't making shots. That was pretty solid strategy as well. But Carolina, did a good job of defending the guys that they needed to down the stretch. Taking away, making it difficult for UCLA. I mean, you look at that final possession, that's a tough shot that Carolina made them take. And then you get that defensive rebound, which was another thing that we asked them to do in this game. That's part of being, of the defensive end of the floor. And Carolina took care of that when they needed to. Bilodeau, he got his throughout this game. But the guy that Carolina did a great job of taking out of the game in the second half after he dominated the first half was Sebastian Mack. He had 16 points in the first half. And Carolina just had no answers. They couldn't stay in front of him. And that was breaking down everything that Carolina was doing on that end of the floor. In the second half, he scores just 6 points. All of it came at the foul line, and Carolina did a much better job of staying in front of him. So, I think this team, what's frustrating is that we've seen it in the second half. When they have to find a way to come back, Carolina can turn up the defensive pressure and play as well as anybody on that end of the floor. And yes, part of it is that they were using the full court press, but part of it was just in the half court, they were defending better. They were putting more pressure on the ball. They were making things more difficult on UCLA. And, throughout the game, there were a few different possessions where UCLA gets late in the shot clock and either commits a shot clock violation or has to throw up a bad shot because Carolina was defending at such a high level. But then you have those moments where things are just so easy on the other end of the floor where it's just a moment of, a momentary lapse from this group. And Carolina, it's just so frustrating because you're like, look, we know you're capable of being, a consistent defensive team. And we saw it in the game against Georgia Tech. Now, part of that might be that Georgia Tech simply just isn't that good of an offensive team. But I want to believe that, that game, Carolina really competed on the defensive end of the floor for 40 minutes. Hopefully that's something that you'll see more of in conference play, because if they gave that effort that they gave in the second half against Florida, and in this game, down the stretch, after getting down by 16 in that second half, then, they have a chance to be one of the better defensive teams in the country. And, with some uncertainty about, relying on your guards to sort of carry you throughout the season because you don't have that low post scoring threat, you're going to need some games where you win because your defense simply plays that well. So hopefully this is one of those games that Carolina looks at the way that they played in that second half and says, how can we unlock that for full games when we get into conference play?
All right. Well, now we got to really talk about, in my opinion, the one negative thing that came out of this game, because it's going to be important moving forward, and that's the turnovers. Carolina turned the ball over 18 times. That led to 24 points for UCLA. Now, oddly enough, Carolina is now 3-1 under Hubert Davis when they turn the ball over 18 times, which would lead you to think that that's not a track record for sustained success. even though they have a 75% winning percentage in games when they do so. I'm here to tell you this is not sustainable. Just like falling behind double digits is not sustainable. We've learned that the hard way. It's a big reason why we've got 5 losses. Carolina can't keep turning the ball over and expecting to win. They just can't. This group's margin for error is too slim to give away that many possessions and that many free points to the opponent. And Elliot Cadeau needs this week to, I think, honestly, just get away from basketball. Go spend some time with your friends. Go spend some time with your family. If you want to watch some film, cool. You want to get some shots up in the gym, cool. This group doesn't come back together until the night after Christmas, January 26th. They'll start preparing for the Campbell game. When that practice happens, there needs to be a reinforcement of how important it is to value the basketball. And it starts with their point guard. Cadeau has now turned the ball over at least 4 times in 6 of the last 7 games. We talk about how important he is, especially if Carolina is going to play this 4-guard lineup. His importance goes to an even higher level because the game should be easier for him because you're setting up your other guys to make plays. And there's no denying that he did do that in the second half. But it came after a series of turnovers in the first half. It's not just him, though. Some of the mental turnovers Carolina committed today, you don't overcome and you don't win. We got called for being out of bounds 3 times in this game.
Yeah,
our guys just don't know where they're at on the court. That happens once, maybe twice. Okay, fine, whatever. 3 times is 3 too many, and especially in a game where you turn it over 18 times. And so you would like to think with 4 guards on the court, the turnovers would lessen because you got more ball handlers. But Cadeau turned it over 4 times. Ian Jackson turned it over 4 times. R.J. Davis and Seth Trimble both turned it over twice. There has to be a come-to-Jesus moment for this group to realize we're not good enough to turn it over this much and win. Not at the rate that we want to, not the rate that you are expected to. And so you got to credit UCLA. Some of it was there forcing the turnovers to take place, but when this group comes back together, that's got to be a big emphasis moving forward because you can't keep turning it over the way that you've been turning it over here recently in conference play because that's how you'll lose games. Quite simply, you can't afford to lose.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense either because early in the season, we saw this team hold on to the ball better than anybody in the entire country. And I get it. I mean, it's not the same level of competition, but it just doesn't make sense to me how now, I mean, you're a team that in certain games, you can't help but turn the ball over almost every single time you come down to the court during a certain 4-minute span. And look, this game, it's hard to figure out how much of this was on Carolina and how much of it was also in part due to UCLA being the team that that turns people over more than any team in the country. This is a phenomenal defensive team. They came in averaging 18.5 turnovers forced per game, and Carolina was right there. But the frustrating part is when you see a guy like Elliot Cadeau continue to make mistakes over and over again, and he gets left on the court. That's where Hubert has to take him out of the game, settle him down for a minute, and then put him back in. Especially a guy like Elliot, where it seems like when those turnovers happen, it's a snowball effect. It starts with one, and it just continues to grow until you take him off the floor and allow him to settle down, get a little coaching from Marcus Page, and he gets back in the game. And so, certain times, he's able to shake it off. I thought today was one of those days. Turns the ball over 5 times. He had one of the biggest shots of the game from deep for Carolina. So that's the thing that hopefully when you get into conference play, you see this sort of dissipate a little bit. the thing is that I guess we probably should have seen this coming. It was a scrimmage. Carolina forced a lot of turnovers in it as well. When you turn the ball over 22 times in a scrimmage against Memphis, that probably should have been our hint that maybe this is going to be a team that'll struggle with that at some point this season. But you're right. I mean, Carolina, they have 2 games that they have turned the ball over 18 times in a 4-game span. And those are 2 wins for Carolina, Georgia Tech and this game against UCLA. So, yeah, I mean, they've got to realize that's not a recipe for success. When you play teams in conference, that could be the reason that it keeps them in the game. Hell, that was the reason that you saw UCLA get off to the start that they got off to. I mean, Carolina in the first half turns the ball over 11 times, and UCLA did a great job of turning that into 12 points on that end of the floor. I mean, overall, 24 points off of turnovers is crazy. I mean, that's something that, part of that is Carolina not getting back defensively, but there are other times where, if you turn the ball over, especially up top when it's one of your guards handling it, it's going to be hard to get back down the floor once a team gets a run out. So, they've got to be able to hold on to the ball better. The stepping out of bounds thing, I mean, there's nothing more infuriating because that's something you control that. You know where you're at on the floor. And really, to me, it was only 2. The third one was a high pass that Drake Powell went up and grabbed and then came down out of bounds. But, I mean, we're talking – I could count on one hand before this season the moments that I remember like that of Carolina just not knowing where they're at on the floor. It seems like once a game now, Carolina has one of those moments where a guy in the corner just doesn't realize where he's at and he ends up stepping out of bounds. Those are turnovers that are inexcusable because, when they come back to haunt you later in a game when you're in a 1-possession game down the stretch, those are moments that you look back to when you say, that's right, we could have had possession on that end of the floor. That could have been a positive moment for us. I mean, heck, one of them, if I remember correctly during today's game, Carolina, it was Cade Tyson. He was out of bounds. He literally knocks down a shot afterwards. That would have been his only points of the game. That could have been a confidence booster for him. So, hopefully they get that corrected. Hopefully that's a focal point for Hubert Davis and this staff during the Christmas holidays. Take care of the basketball because that's the way that you're going to keep some of these these struggling teams in the ACC around and give them a chance to pull upsets against you here in the next couple of months.
All right, the discussion topic I had laid out for tonight was around Ian Jackson being the best freshman since. You kind of talked about that earlier in the show, so I'm not going to relitigate that conversation. He's up there, and he's a special talent. We knew that upon him coming in. Drake Powell kind of flashed before he did. He had the big games down in Maui, but we knew that this potential was there. It was just a matter of it really coming to fruition. It's here. He's arrived. He's going to be a big part of what Carolina does down the stretch. And I think him and RJ learning to play together, along with Trimble and Cadeau in that backcourt, might just unlock the best version of whatever this team can be and will be for the upcoming season. So with that, we'll go ahead and hand out our game balls and then get out of this edition of the podcast. I'll go first, and I'll take Ian Jackson for my game ball tonight. 24 points, 8 of 13 from the floor, 3 of 7 from 3, 5 of 8 from the foul line, 4 rebounds, no assists. Did commit 3 fouls and 4 turnovers in 32 minutes, but played the second most minutes of anybody on the court. Was the best player on the floor for Carolina in the second half. I felt like where he scored 11 points, was 4 of 6 from the foul line, and just really took Carolina to another gear. And so I think this is the first time I've given him a game ball after a game so far this year. If I had to predict moving forward, it wouldn't be his last.
Yeah, I mean, especially since you're the guy that goes first whenever we do all these, I feel like you'll probably have a shot.
My podcast.
Again, that's true. It's true. RJ Davis, I think, has to be the guy that you give it to. I mean, 5 of 12 from the field. So, again, more efficient, not as efficient as some people would probably like him to be, but more importantly, 5 of 6 from the line. And he missed a key free throw. But you got to love the fact that he gets another opportunity. He comes back, knocks both of them down, gives Carolina the lead. That was huge for him. And I mean, finishes the day with 17 points. To me, it feels like he's starting to get into a little bit of a rhythm here. And Carolina really needed him too. That game against Florida, I think, was what awoke him. And now I'm going to be interested to see what he looks like during conference play, because it seems like the confidence is there. Playing as well as he did the other night against Florida, even in a loss, I think helped him personally. But now, being able to get his team a big win in Madison Square Garden, I think that's going to be huge for him as a leader of this team as well. And so I think this is one of those games when you look back, and if Carolina goes on a run here in conference play, and if we end up making a deep run in March, this will be the stretch that you can look back to for RJ Davis as to where he started getting going for Carolina and ultimately leading to the team that we know they can be.
Well, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Four Corners podcast. In the meantime, guys, we encourage you to visit the website, HeelToughBlog.com. The recap article will be up later this evening. Prioritize getting podcasts ready over recap article. The article will be posted, and we want you to go and check that out. Football, another transfer landed today for Bill Belichick and his staff. Any news and notes that come out of the transfer portal, of course, we'll keep you updated as well. And then we'll be getting ready for the bowl game. Carolina in the Fenway Bowl a week from today, and so the next week we'll be getting you ready for the upcoming bowl action while keeping you up to date on what Bill Belichick is doing as he's putting together his roster and putting together his first staff in Chapel Hill. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Simply search the Four Corners Podcast and we'll pop up. There, we encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the basketball season. The Heels are off for 8 days. It's the holiday break for Carolina basketball. We're going to take some time. We're going to kind of get away, decompress, but we want you to stay locked in with us because we'll be back before you know it talking Carolina basketball. So with that, guys, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.